Welcome back, MTN Giants podcast, reacting to the Giants 2024 schedule and answering some mailbag questions. Now, as I'm recording right now, the schedule is not out yet, but I'm going to answer the mailbag questions, but I'll react to the schedule tomorrow when it comes out, but I'll just put it all in one video because it probably makes the most sense. So anyway, for those who ask questions, I appreciate it. We'll get to those. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Leave a like, subscribe, all that, and let's get into it. Here I am, a day later, and the schedule is out, just like magic. Look at that. So, looking at it just right off the top, I mean, it's a pretty favorable schedule the first couple weeks. I think home versus Minnesota week 1 is pretty ideal. You're either facing Sam Darnold, who definitely has some MetLife experience, of course, or J.J. McCarthy. So it's either his first career start or you're getting Sam Darnold, who's like the 30th best quarterback in football. And I know the Vikings have weapons and they signed Aaron Jones, and Deontay Banks will have a tough matchup with Jefferson week 1, but it's good. It's going to be a good matchup for him, and hopefully he does well. Week 2 is at the Commanders. The Giants historically have done a pretty good job at Washington in recent years. So you're looking at a scenario where, yeah, they could go 2-0. It's not going to be the most shocking thing in the world if they do. So far, not too bad. Week 3 gets a bit tougher at the Cleveland Browns. A lot of that relies on Deshaun Watson. And will he be good? And Watson has not been elite since the 2020 season, I believe. Might have been 21, but I'm pretty sure it's been 2020. So he's had a rough time the past few years with suspension and injuries and all that. So it depends how he looks, but the Browns, of course, had one of the better defenses in football last year. It's a tough place to play, so definitely just not an easy matchup for sure. It will be tough, could be low scoring. Week 4 is a short week. The Giants are back home to host the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football. I think Dallas might take a bit of a step back this year. I know their win total is like 10.5, which seems a bit high. But Dallas feels like a team that did not get better in the offseason, so I'm not as afraid of them as I've been in the past few years. But ultimately, the Giants have had a tough time with this team, and since forever it feels like. I mean, especially since like Dak Prescott took over. So I don't know what to expect, but it should be a tough game. In week 6, it's a long wait. Sunday Night Football is a home game. No, I'm sorry. I just skipped a week. Week 5 is at the Seahawks, which will be tough. So you're going from Thursday night versus the Cowboys at home to on the road versus the Seahawks. And obviously playing there is tough, whether it's Sam Howell or Geno Smith. That team is pretty good. We played them last year. Didn't go too well. We saw what Jones did in that game. It wasn't too pretty. The game after that's week 6 versus the Bengals on Sunday Night Football. A lot of it depends on the health of Joe Burrow. If he's playing, I would think the Bengals are still favored on the road in that game. So would not be the most shocking thing if the Giants lost that game. Then in week 7, they're home versus the Eagles. So not any easier. It's Saquon's return to MetLife. I'm sure he'll get some boos, hopefully a lot. So we know the Giants' history versus Philly. They did beat them last year in the final week of the season, so we did have that going for us. And I think we beat them at home back in 2021 or 21. I'm pretty sure it was 21. Week 8 is at the Steelers on Monday Night Football. I'm pretty high on Pittsburgh this year. I know like their win total is only like 8.5. I would definitely take the over if it's that, if I'm remembering that correctly. The Steelers every freaking year have 8, 9, 10 wins. I think their quarterback room is improved as compared to what it's been the past couple years. I mean, with Pickett and Mason Rudolph and Mitch Trubisky. I mean, say what you want about Russell Wilson right now, but he's better than those guys, and maybe even Justin Fields, who will be the backup. You have week 9 versus the Commanders at home, so that's good. It should be a easier matchup as compared to the previous few weeks here. I'm not taking Washington lightly. I made a video about them a couple weeks ago, probably like a month ago. But I don't want to say I'm super high on them, but I liked what they've done in the offseason. Obviously, I love Adam Peters as a GM there. Dan Quinn, he should be an improvement over Ron Rivera. I mean, I think Ron Rivera has been pretty overrated the past few years. So I'm not taking that team lightly, but historically in the past few years, the Giants have done a good job in this matchup versus the Commanders. Week 10 is in Germany against the Panthers and Bryce Young. The Panthers, once again, should be a pretty bad football team. They may not be as bad as last year, but I'm not expecting this dramatic jump from being the worst team in football to competing for a playoff spot. Maybe they win 5 or 6 games, but I still think the Panthers are a pretty bad football team, so hopefully the Giants get that W going into the bye in Week 11. They come out the bye in Week 12 versus the Buccaneers, who were a good team last year, won a playoff game versus Philly. Mayfield got the new contract. I do like Mayfield. It's a bit of a hefty contract, but that's what you got to do, I guess. So yeah, we'll see what they look like next year. I'm not high or low on the Buccaneers. They're kind of just like a 8-9 win team for me. So we'll see what they look like by Week 12. Thanksgiving, another short week. So 2 short weeks for the Giants this year, 2 Thursday games. I guess same for Dallas Tech. It's kind of weird though. Well, I guess you can't move Thanksgiving. I'm saying, like, why not play? This makes no sense what I'm saying. I was going to say, like, why couldn't they play on a Thursday after the bye? But once again, you can't move Thanksgiving, so stupid point by me. But anyway, Week 13 at the Cowboys, Thanksgiving. It'll be like that 4:25 slot, whatever it is we see every year. The Giants played on Thanksgiving a couple times in the past 10 years or so. There was that horrific game against the Redskins in I think it was 2017, the 3-win season. That was horrible. And then there was it a couple years ago? I think it was a couple years ago they lost too. So, Thanksgiving, not the best memories in recent years for the Giants. Week 14 is home versus the Saints, which I'm not high on the Saints. I've never been a big Derek Carr guy, as you guys know. So I'm hoping the Giants can win that. I feel like the Saints and Giants are pretty evenly matched, but I like the Giants coaching more. It's a home game, so I'm thinking the Giants have a good chance to win that one. Then in Week 15, they host the Ravens, which, of course, if Lamar's healthy, that's a very tough game to win. The Giants beat them at home in 2022. I do remember Lamar had some bad turnovers in that game, which, cost them the game. But hey, it's been done before, so we'll see. Week 16 at the Falcons, and Kirk Cousins. Could be Penix if Cousins is injured or something. But this is not the toughest matchup. I know that Vegas is pretty high on the Falcons this year. They're like 9.5 wins right now as their win total. I don't know if I would go that high on them, especially with Cousins coming off an Achilles. But maybe they'll be good. Maybe we'll be looking at that matchup, and being like, damn, this is going to be tough. And the Giants might be touchdown underdogs or something. I don't know. Week 17, home versus the Colts. I think the Giants had this exact matchup a couple of years ago in 22, which clinched them that playoff spot. Jones had the big game with the 2 rushing touchdowns. Bobby Okereke was on the other side of the ball. I will say, though, it depends if Anthony Richardson's healthy, which he couldn't stay healthy last year, but I'm very high on the Colts this year. I think if Richardson's healthy, they'll be a very good team. They'll probably flirt with a playoff spot. They may win their division. It would not shock me, so I'm definitely high on the Colts this year. We'll see what they look like by this point. And then Week 18, the automatic L, I guess you can call it at this point, because the Giants have not won in Philly since 2013 or something. I mean, did they win in Philly last year? No, last year when they beat Philly, they were home. So they lost at Philly. It was 33-25. It was that game. So yeah, they have not won in Philly in a very long time. I think it was since 2013 or so. So not expecting a win there, but we'll see what kind of position the Eagles are in by then. So overall, I mean, look, I think even without looking at the schedule, my expectations for this team is like a 6 or 7 win season. I could see it being a bit more. I think 10 is kind of crazy. I know some people may say that, but I don't know. I just think 6 or 7 is where I'm going to land by the time I actually make a real prediction. But, looking at it now, I think they have to get off to a quick start. You cannot afford to go 0-2 versus the Vikings and Commanders. You at least have to split and just take it from there. Maybe Cleveland's offense is awful next year. Maybe Nick Chubb is not the same guy off the knee injury. So maybe you start out the year 2-1, or should I say 3-0 maybe. So I know I'm kind of dreaming there, but still, they have to get off to a good start. At least go 2-1, I think, because from weeks 4 through 8, it's the Cowboys, Seahawks, Bengals, Eagles, and Steelers. That's 5 games right there, where it's very tough, and the Giants will probably not be favored in any of those games. Maybe they will if Dak Prescott's hurt, or if Joe Burrow's hurt or something like that. But, assuming guys are healthy, the Giants will not be favored in any of those games probably. Weeks 9 and 10, I would say you have to at least split those games, the Commanders and Panthers games. Commanders is at home, of course, Panthers in Germany, so a neutral field. I would say 2-0 would be more ideal, but at least split. In the second half of the year, I think that home game versus the Saints in Week 14, you have to look at that as a game you pretty much have to win because you play some tough teams. You're going to play the Cowboys on Thanksgiving at Dallas. You're going to play the Ravens right after the Saints game. At Atlanta could be tough once again. I think the Colts will be tough, and then at Philly. So you have some tough matchups here, and they're all kind of like bunched up. I think once again, weeks 4 through 8 are tough matchups, and then you look at weeks. I don't want to include Tampa, but you could, because once again, they made the second round last year. They had a really good offense last year, but I'll keep them out of it. But weeks 13 through 18 are tough, except for that game versus the Saints. Cowboys, Ravens, Falcons, Colts, Eagles. I think that's tough. So, got to win some of these games for sure. I think starting off the season on a strong note or a good note, I'm pretty sure is what the saying is vital for this team. They cannot start out 0-2. If the Giants lose these first two games, you are looking at a start where it could be very ugly of 1-6, 1-7, something like that, which, unfortunately we've been accustomed to that since like 2017, but you just cannot have that. You have to start out the year strong the same way they did in 2022. I'm not saying it's going to result in a playoff berth like it did that year, but you cannot afford to come out here and drop these games. You cannot afford to go into the game versus Dallas on Thursday Night Football at 0-3. Like, it's going to be a bad look. So, we'll see what happens. Could have been easier. I guess it's not the hardest schedule. I think last year might have been a bit worse if I remember correctly, but I think some things kind of went their way. I think the 2 games before the bye week are pretty favorable, and the first 2 games of the season are pretty favorable. So I think the schedule makers did they did the Giants a solid with that. But as I said before, a lot of these tough matchups are kind of bunched together. And, if you really struggle in those games, the losses will start to snowball and the season could get out of hand pretty quickly. So you don't want that to happen. So we'll see. But overall, not the worst schedule. And now back to the questions. First question, in no particular order, but first question from Danny. Hey, Mike. Hey, Danny. Do you think DJ will have a similar, better, or worse season to his 2022 run, given that the O-line is supposedly improved and he has more weapons necessary to make or break him? It's tough to get a read on what Daniel Jones will be in 2024. I'm just going off kind of like a gut feel and what I think he is, and, I'm probably lower on him more than other Giants podcasts and content people and whatnot. So with that said, I'm not expecting anything great, but he probably will get a chance to prove himself. Because think about it, like he already had his issues before the injury, and now we're talking about 2 neck injuries and a torn ACL, and putting that on top of the issues he already had, whether it was processing a defense or knowing where a blitz was coming from, throwing with anticipation, going through progressions, even taking deep shots down the field, things like that. So there were things before the injuries about Daniel Jones that I was not a big fan of. And now you throw in a torn ACL and the neck injuries, and it's like, well, does it get any better? I mean, it's hard to say yes to that. As you brought up in the question, yeah, they made some improvements. They brought in Runyon. They brought in Illuminor. Of course, Malik Neighbors in the draft. So, yeah, there's definitely going to be some weapons at his disposal that he's never had. There has not been a Malik Neighbors level wide receiver or weapon in general, unless you want to include Saquon Barkley, but there has not been this type of weapon for Daniel Jones since he's been in the NFL. So this will be his best receiver, but I don't think adding Malik Neighbors and a couple of offensive linemen from free agency all of a sudden make Daniel Jones like this 2022 level quarterback who is like top 15 once again. It'd be nice, but I just feel like it'd be foolish to sit here and say that. So I'm not saying he's like completely cooked. He'll probably have a pretty long NFL career as a backup and maybe like a fringe starter or like a bridge quarterback here and there, kind of like what Gardner Minshew does now. But I do think, like, I'm expecting his next season to be closer to 2023 than 2022. I feel like 2022, all the stars aligned. The Giants got every bounce. He rushed for like 700 yards and played turnover-free football. Like, so many things went right for them that season that it just seems like it's probably not going to happen again. It'd be nice once again, but I'm just not expecting it. And then you got to ask yourself the question of, okay, well, how long of a leash does he have? Like, does he even win the starting job? I mean, I would think he does over Drew Lock, but there's no guarantee he plays every game. Like, this is one of the first seasons in a while, I guess Tyrod to a degree, but this seems like one of the first seasons in a while where there is some legitimate quarterback competition for who is quarterback one in week one. Like in 2022, when when Shane and Dable first came in, they pretty much made it known, yeah, Daniel Jones is our starter. Well, maybe not right away, because I know there was that weird thing about how Dable wouldn't address Daniel Jones by name, but you know what I'm saying. So this is like the first like real question of who is going to be under center week one. So if Drew Lock is the starter, I would not be shocked, but ultimately, I lean Daniel Jones right now, like 60-40. But my point is, we don't know how long of a leash he'll have. He might start 5 or 6 games, maybe less, and looks like he did last year. And the coaching staff is like, all right, we can't do this anymore. And they just bench him, A, because of bad performance, but B, because of his injury history and that insurance guarantee, because if Daniel Jones gets hurt again and can't pass a physical next offseason, the Giants owe him X amount of dollars. I forget the amount off the top of my head, but it's a good amount. So there's those two things looming, and I just think to expect him to be the 2022 version, which once again is like a borderline top 15 level quarterback, and I don't care about QBR and whatnot because he didn't have turnovers. Obviously, his QBR is going to look great. Like, he played efficient at the quarterback position, but there was nothing that was overly impressive. He was last in the NFL in average depth of target. Like, yeah, it was a pretty good season, but you can poke a lot of holes into why, it wasn't that impressive. Next, from Fighter's Destiny, what do you think about our new offensive line coach? I know a blind person could probably do a better job than Bobby Johnson, but do you feel like our line won't be trash like it has been for years? I feel like the best way to answer this and the most fair way to answer this is going off past performance, kind of like I said with the Jones question. So I went back and looked at the Raiders PFF offensive line ranks, and in 2020, which was 2 years before Brasillo got there, they were 24th in the NFL. Then in 2021, a year before Brasillo got there, they were ranked 28th, so bottom 5. So then, after a 28th ranked offensive line season, Carmen Brasillo comes in, and in 2022, the Raiders had a top 10 ranked offensive line at number 10 overall. Josh Jacobs was also the NFL rushing leader that season, so the offensive line definitely helped with that. And in 2023, last season, they also had the 10th ranked offensive line by PFF. So back-to-back top 10 seasons, and it's not like the Raiders had that much talent. Of course, Colton Miller at left tackle, one of the better left tackles in the league. And he broke out a year before Brasillo got there, but still, like, he was able to maintain and be one of the top left tackles in football once Brasillo got there. It's not like he got there and Colton Miller took a massive step back. That would have been a big red flag. So he had some guys, but it wasn't the most talented offensive line group. The only highly drafted guy they had for Brasillo, like, I'm thinking about from a development standpoint, which young players did he have? They already had cut Alex Leatherwood from the 2020 draft, or was it 21? I forget, but one of those drafts. They did draft Dylan Parham in the 3rd round that year in 2022. That was the first year Brasillo was there, and he's been a decent starter, like nothing too impressive, but a 3rd round pick. He's been a decent starter. But here's the thing about, I'm kind of going to go off topic here a bit, but the thing about the Giants and the offensive line thing, I do feel like it gets overblown sometimes because I feel like, and I've said this before and I've really harped on it in the past, is I think a lot of our offensive line issues are also a quarterback issue. And I went back and did the numbers. Obviously, look, before I get into this, we should know that quarterbacks have a certain level of responsibility for how many sacks are taken, right? You're the guy who's physically getting sacked, right? There are some sacks that are unavoidable, but ultimately it is up to the quarterback to read the defense, know where a blitz is coming from, know where my hot read is, can I get the ball out quickly, things like that. So I went back and looked, and this was the sack, or these were the sack percentages for all three Giants quarterbacks last year. It's just basically it's amount of times a quarterback has dropped back divided by the amount of times a quarterback's been sacked, or vice versa. So Daniel Jones last season had a 15.8% sack percentage. Not very good. Tommy DeVito did even worse at a 17.2% sack percentage. And then Tyrod Taylor cut that in half basically and was at 8.6% last year. So Jones and DeVito were sacked on over 15% of their dropbacks last year. Tyrod Taylor was just 8.6. So same team, same offensive line for the most part. I know there were some rotations in there. Jones didn't have Andrew Thomas for a lot of last year. I get it. I understand. But it's a drastic difference. 15% to 8% sack rate. It's a massive drop-off. And I went back and looked at the league average sack rate from last season. It was 6.7%. So all three Giants quarterbacks, even though Tyrod did the best job by a wide margin, all three Giants quarterbacks had a below average sack percentage. So then I went back and looked at Drew Lock. And last year, Drew Lock, in how many starts was it? Was it 4, 3, 2? It was only 2 starts, 4 games. He played in the game against us for like a drive or two and had a couple other starts in there. But of course, mostly it was Geno Smith as a starter. But last season, Drew Lock was even lower, a 7.3% sack percentage. And so once again, the NFL average is 6.7%. Drew Lock for his career, so this is mostly going back to his days in Denver for the most part, but Drew Lock's career sack percentage is only 4.7%, which is 2% below league average, which is really good. So if there's one massive difference between Daniel Jones and Drew Lock, which I know there already are some big differences, Lock likes to take chances, Jones doesn't, but another massive difference between them is that Drew Lock has been a quarterback who has not taken many sacks when he's played. And the last time he's been a full-time starter, really, was 2020, his second year, where he did lead the league in interceptions. But in that season, Lock only had a 4.1% sack percentage. For his career, his sack percentage is 4.7%. So ultimately, there's a big difference there. I'm sure team context definitely comes into it. But I'm thinking back to like the Broncos offensive lines in 2019, 2021. I don't think they were anything spectacular. I can go back and look at the grades and whatnot, but off the top of my head, I don't remember Denver being that great. Like Garrett Bowles eventually came around, but there were also guys on the offensive line there that were kind of not very good. Okay, yeah, I was right. So I went back and looked. Denver was ranked 25th as an offensive line unit in 2020 by PFF. They had Garrett Bowles once again. That was Lloyd Cushenberry's rookie year. He was not very good for them. Elijah Wilkinson was their starting right tackle because Jawan James was out once again. They had Dalton Reisner. But yeah, they were not much better. The Giants were ranked 31st that year, so 25th, 31st. Okay, Denver was a bit better. But it's not like their offensive line was that great that year. It was pretty bad. So even with that bad offensive line in Denver, his sack percentage, Drew Lock, was only 4.1%. So once again, back to this whole question, I do think there will be improvements, but I would love to see how Drew Lock looks behind this offensive line as compared to Daniel Jones. I really would, because we saw this last year with Tyrod, how Jones got sacked all the time, and DeVito got sacked all the time, and then Tyrod came in, who has a lot of agility and can get away from pass rushers, even on straight on blitzes. He can make a guy miss, can juke out edge rushers. Like, he does things that DeVito and Jones don't do. I mean, Jones is fast. I've always said Jones is a fast, straight-line runner. But Jones, when you're talking about lateral agility, he's not too impressive. But Tyrod Taylor was very impressive in terms of being nimble and quick on his feet, things that you need to get away from sacks at some points, and Tyrod Taylor had that. Drew Lock, for the most part, doesn't really have that, but he must have something about him where he could read a defense better or just gets the ball out quicker. I mean, there has to be something with Drew Lock why his sack percentage is so dramatically less than Daniel Jones. So anyway, I'm looking forward to that. But for Carmen Bricillo, based on the work he did in Las Vegas, having a back-to-back top 10 offensive line. Yes, it was number 10 exactly, but still, a top 10 offensive line, having gone from 28th the year before he got there to number 10 the year after he gets there. It's very impressive, so it should be an improvement, and as you said, anything's better than Bobby Johnson. Next question from Cesar. How do you feel about sloppy seconds at quarterback, trading for a high drafted quarterback prospect that didn't work out elsewhere to see if they could be a starter? For example, what the Bears just did with Justin Fields, what the Panthers did with Sam Darnold. I guess you meant what the Steelers did with Fields. You kind of confused me there. I guess you meant Steelers. And there was another question from Bark2650. Would you be opposed to getting a veteran quarterback if we can't draft one next year, like a Dak, Stafford, Geno, or Fields? So let me just throw out the whole Justin Fields thing right off the bat. If the Giants wanted Justin Fields, they would have had him this past offseason. Like, there's no reason why they couldn't get him. I forget off the top of my head what the trade was exactly, but it really was not a lot. I'm going to look it up real quickly. So the Bears traded Fields in exchange for a 6th-round pick that could be a 4th-round pick based on playing time. All right, so yeah, a 6th-round pick that could be a 4th at most. I mean, that was the cost to get Justin Fields. So I really feel if the Giants wanted him or at least had a little interest, Justin Fields would be a Giant right now. Like, the guy the Giants wanted apparently was Russell Wilson. He went to Pittsburgh. And I feel like if they really were pissed about missing out on Russell Wilson, and maybe they were, but they would have been fine with getting Justin Fields as a replacement, they would have done it. So I just don't see Justin Fields being in their plans, but I could be wrong. So this is why I said that even though I like Malik, or even I love Malik Neighbors, he's going to be a really good player in this league. That's why fans like myself were we were disappointed about not getting a quarterback in this past draft, right? You had a top 6 pick. There were, 6 quarterbacks in the top 12 picks. Like, I was hoping they would find one they liked, because this is the problem you run into, right? The 2025 free agent class is going to be, not Goff. I wrote down Goff, but he got extended today, so he's off the list. So Goff is gone. You got Tua Tagovailoa, which I am not a huge fan of. Like, if he can't succeed with Mike McDaniel, with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and we'll see with Odell this year, but, with that great offensive mind in Miami with ideal weather for the most part, I mean, I just can't do it with Tua. I mean, he's fine in certain games, in certain matchups, in certain games where the weather's perfect. Tua looks like one of the best quarterbacks on the planet, but if you throw him at MetLife for half his games, I just don't see it. Russell Wilson, I mean, yeah, they could have had him this year. Obviously, they didn't want him bad enough, or I don't know, but Russell Wilson chose the Steelers instead. Dak Prescott, like, do we really want Dak Prescott? I sat here, not here, but I sat last offseason and listened to half the Giants fan base, maybe more, saying that Dak Prescott is worse than Daniel Jones. And now, 2 years later, we're going to talk about getting Dak Prescott? Like, come on. I like Dak. I've always been like a Dak, not a fan, but like a Dak defender, I guess you can say. Because I think people are too hard on the guy. Like, he does put up really impressive numbers. I know his playoff success has not been great. The Cowboys have not made it past the second round since I was born, so I mean, that tells you all you need to know right there. But so it's not really on Dak's shoulders entirely, but even for me, a person that defends Dak Prescott, I don't want him as our franchise quarterback. It just makes no sense. Like, it's not a lateral move. Obviously, Dak's an improvement from what we have right now, but it just would not be too exciting. Like, maybe it works, but once again, why would you want to settle for that? Then there's Fields, who I mentioned, Sam Darnold. I mean, like, no, I'm good. And then possible trades, which quarterback trades are not too likely, but there's always a chance it could happen. One of these high-profile guys gets really fed up and they want out. But even in that case, like, let's just hypothetically say that Josh Allen became very upset with Sean McDermott and Billy Bean, not Billy Bean, what the hell is his name? Brandon Bean. Let's say he gets upset with those guys, right? And the Bills they have a decision to make. Josh Allen gives them an ultimatum. Either get rid of this head coach and GM or I'm out of here. The Bills would probably be smart enough to get rid of the coach and the GM. Like even in that case, in that rare case that this happens, I still think they pick Josh Allen. So the likelihood of these guys being traded, I'm saying right now, is very, very minuscule. But I'll just list them anyway. Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, and Trevor Lawrence. And I think, did Trevor Lawrence just get extended? Okay, he's not extended yet, but they're talking about it. So it would not be too shocking if he got extended pretty soon. I'm sure his agents loved seeing that Jared Goff contract, that's for sure. So ultimately, I don't know what their plan is. That's why when they passed on a quarterback this year, I was like, what the hell are we doing? Like, we're kicking the can down the road on the most important position in sports. I just don't get it. Like, yeah, Malik Neighbors, very talented player. It's tough to pass on that, but when you don't have a quarterback and you're picking this high in the draft, I mean, maybe the Giants anticipate picking high again next year because, let's be honest, their roster's not very good and the Giants' win total is 6.5 coming into this year. So, like, maybe they just expect to be bad again next year and then get their quarterback next year. They obviously really like Drake May. They won too many games for that. So, I just feel like they're almost putting themselves into a 2019 situation, which is scary, where Dave Gettleman kind of felt the pressure of like, okay, we have to get a quarterback this offseason. Like, we tried this with Eli. It didn't work. We have to get a quarterback. And then they very much reached for Daniel Jones. They took him 6th overall when some people thought he'd be a 2nd or 3rd round pick. So you kind of run into those situations where you get too desperate. And I feel like if Joe Shane and Brian Daboll and the Giants have another down year this year, and let's say that they're a 5 or 6 win team, there's going to be a lot of pressure to get a quarterback. And maybe they'll take one that they don't necessarily love, but they feel the pressure in doing so, like the Giants did with Daniel Jones, 5-6 years ago. So that's the situation I'm looking like. It's definitely possible that happens. It would not be ideal because you don't want to pick a quarterback out of desperation. That's why I was hoping that out of McCarthy, Penix, and Nix, really just McCarthy and Penix, that they would have liked one of those guys enough to take them at number 6, but they didn't. So we'll see how that plays out. Maybe those guys suck, and maybe Joe Shane's right, and maybe next year in the draft, a perfect prospect falls to the Giants at number whatever they pick. So maybe it all works out. But right now, I don't know what their plan is. Maybe they trade for a guy next offseason. But once again, when does a quarterback in their prime become available for trade? It's rare. Like, yeah, Aaron Rodgers got traded at 39 years old, and we saw how that went last year. And that's exciting. And I probably would have done the same thing if I was the Jets in that same position. But it's like very rare. And even when those guys do become available, at that point, they're very seasoned, right? I mean, 39 years old. I don't see Josh Allen at 27, 28 years old, and same for Joe Burrow becoming available. I just don't see it. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope next year at this time, we're talking about Josh Allen's a Giant, Joe Burrow's a Giant, Justin Herbert's a Giant. It'd be great, but it's tough to bank on that going into next year. It's just a foolish thing to think about. Next, we had 2 similar-ish questions, so I put them together. So Random Ray 1 asked, do you think Malik Neighbors will continue to become a better receiver as the year progresses and even a top 10 receiver in the league, even if he has a mediocre quarterback like Daniel Jones, Locke, or DeVito? And then Colton asked, why do you not think Malik Neighbors can have a Justin Jefferson level impact for the Giants where it doesn't matter who's throwing him the ball because he'll be dominating regardless? I mean, all right, so if I had to make the Jefferson comparison, like, he did have Kirk Cousins, he did have an empty stadium, like it was a really ideal situation for a rookie year for him. But anyway, so his over-under Malik Neighbors is 850 yards this year, which is a fair number. I'm expecting him to be somewhere between 800 and 1,000. And remember, the Giants have never had a 1,000-yard receiver since Odell left and since Daniel Jones has been here, so it's been since 2018. So obviously, we've seen plenty of examples of a good receiver with bad quarterback play, and they put up some insane numbers. Even last year, there were a lot of examples. I went back and looked. Amari Cooper had 1,250 with Flacco, DTR, and Deshaun Watson as his quarterbacks. Michael Pittman had 1,152 with Richardson for about 4 games and Gardner Minshew. Devontae Adams had 1,144 with Jimmy Garoppolo and Aiden O'Connell. George Pickens had over 1,100 with Pickett and Trubisky, and I think Mason Rudolph was in there too for a bit. DeAndre Hopkins had 1,057 with Will Levis and Ryan Tannehill. And of course, Garrett Wilson, I think, did it twice. He had over 1,000 last year with Zach Wilson. So the issue for Neighbors is he'll probably be playing with Daniel Jones for a portion of the season, maybe majority of the season, maybe the whole season. We don't know, of course. But Jones has been a very, risk-averse type quarterback where he is not going to take many deep shots. We saw last year when Tyrod came in, all of a sudden you saw Jalen Hyatt making a bunch of plays, and it was great. So down the field, I feel like Malik Neighbors may not have that many shots if Jones is the quarterback. And maybe Jones has a mindset this year that's like, you know what, my back's against the wall anyway, F it, let's just go out there and chuck it. Like maybe he has that mindset this year. But based on what he did in 2022 and 2023, throwing the ball down the field was not something Daniel Jones liked to do. And obviously, to be fair to him, he didn't have the greatest receivers, but he still had Slayton. He had Hyatt last year. There was the one Hyatt and Jones connection in the Cardinals game. First play out of halftime, I remember that one. But aside from that, there really wasn't many. And in Jones's 2022 season, as I mentioned, he was dead last in average depth of target at 6.4 yards per attempt. That was worse than Matt Ryan, worse than Colt McCoy. I mean, the guy was just not throwing the ball deep. And part of that could be the coaches asking him not to do that. I mean, 2022 was a lot of rollouts and dump-offs, so that definitely impacts it. But in 2023, Tyrod Taylor was 5th in the NFL last year in ADOT, 9.1 air yards per attempt. Will Levis and Joe Flacco were top 3 in ADOT last year, which obviously helped guys like Amari Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins get over 1,000 yards. But in last time Drew Lock was the full-time starter, which was 2020, and I tweeted this yesterday. Drew Lock was 3rd in the NFL in ADOT at 9.7 average yards per target. So that was more than Tyrod last season. So last time we saw Drew Lock as a starter, he really aired it out. And that's what I like about Drew Lock. Like, yeah, he'll definitely have some dumb passes, but he's not afraid to take deep shots, which Jones has kind of been afraid to do that. So if you do start Lock, you're going to see more interceptions. You're going to see more turnovers probably. But you will see bigger plays. There will be more opportunities for Malik Neighbors downfield. So I think if I'm Neighbors, I want Drew Lock starting. But if it's Daniel Jones, then a lot of the Malik Neighbors yardage may have to come from yards after catch. Like he may have to be like a yak king if Daniel Jones is his starter, which it could happen. It's happened before, but even guys like Golden Tate have had 1,000-yard seasons, I believe, or maybe not, I forget. But yeah, he's had them. I think Tate had like 1,300 one year, the first year after Megatron left. But anyway, so we've seen receivers that normally catch short passes and they're able to yak their way into 1,000 yards. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but if I'm Neighbors, I do want the guy who airs the ball out more and throws it deep and takes more chances. So, we'll see what happens at the quarterback position. But, yeah, I think Neighbors can be fine. Like, he can have a 75, 80 catch season, around 900 yards and 6-7 touchdowns. Like, yeah, it's not, like, going to be tremendous. I mean, who knows? Maybe he has I don't want to say Odell rookie season. That's very rare, but maybe he does have a very good rookie season. I don't think it'll be Jefferson level. I don't think it'll be Odell level. But can he be a level below that? I mean, yeah, it could happen. I could see, like, best case scenario, he has, like, 1,200 yards and 90 catches and 8-9 touchdowns. Like, it's possible. But if I'm predicting, like, what's the most likely thing, I'm going to say it's around 900 yards and 6-7 touchdowns is my guess. So, it's definitely not impossible, but I would love to see this kid with a real quarterback, and whether that's a Dak Prescott next year or somebody like that who's an established starter or just a guy we draft in 2025, I do want to see what Malik Neighbors looks like with a quarterback like that. Next question from Gianelli2291. Do you think the moves we made in the secondary made it worth letting McKinney walk? I mean, no, but I get why they did it. You look at like the safety contracts these days, and McKinney made a lot of money, and even the one that Winfield Jr. just got, Antoine Winfield Jr., he got 4 years, $84 million, like $45 million guaranteed. Like the safety contracts are crazy these days, and with the state of the Giants cap situation and where they're at. And I do want to point out this tweet I saw from one of the over the cap guys. So this was Jason_OTC, and they talked about which teams from 2025 onward have the most fully guaranteed salaries for this is quarterbacks excluded and draft picks this year excluded. So which teams have the most money tied up into non-quarterbacks and non-draft picks this year? And the Giants have $93 million in future guarantees. That's number 3 in the NFL, not including the Daniel Jones contract. So you look at like Andrew Thomas and Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns. Like ultimately, what the Giants did in this offseason was basically, I don't know if this is exactly what they thought to themselves, but to be able to afford the team they have, they had to look at it like, okay, would we rather have McKinney or would we rather have Brian Burns? And ultimately, they chose Brian Burns. Will that be the right decision? We'll see. But there's no way they could have avoided both of those guys. Like when you signed Jones last year, like you kind of took yourself out of that. So McKinney has to leave because of it. They go with the edge rusher instead. I have my concerns about the the secondary, but hopefully Tyler Nubin comes in right away and looks good. He's had a lot of starting experience at Minnesota, so I'm hoping that the NFL transition's not too crazy. It won't be as crazy for him as it is for some other people that have not played as much college football and have that much experience. Then you look at even the cornerback 2 position, like who's the opposite outside corner from Deonte Banks. Like, we don't know. I mean, they keep saying it might be Cordell Flott, who I always thought was a slot corner. It might be Andrew Phillips, who we just drafted in the 3rd round, who also might be more of a slot corner. So I'm not confident in either option at outside corner right now. And then at the other starting safety spot, it's probably Jason Pinnock, but you have Dane Belton behind him. So I don't know. It's not a secondary I feel great about, but if Tyler Nubin comes in and looks great and hits the ground running, I mean, maybe we don't regret the whole McKinney thing. And like, once again, it had to happen. I'm not going to look back on, like, if the Giants have a shitty secondary next year and McKinney has 6 picks and looks amazing, I'm not going to be like, damn, like, I really regret that. Like, yeah, it's going to suck, but I understood why the Giants did it. I get it. I'm not going to look back on that and be like, oh, Joe Shane's an idiot. Like, no, I mean, like, hindsight's 20/20. Like, we'll see how this plays out. So I get why they did it, but it doesn't mean that I'm not concerned about the secondary, because I definitely am. It just really depends how quickly does Tyler Nubin come on and who's going to play outside corner. Like, I keep saying, like, I would love to bring back Adoree Jackson to have that extra depth, but maybe they can't reach on a price right now. Maybe they do eventually. I do want to see them bring in some more veteran corners. They signed David Long from the Raiders. I mean, yeah, it's not anything too impressive. I forgot they had Jalen Mills, who is also not a guy you want to be relying on. So Aaron Robinson, is he a real person? I don't know. Like, maybe Aaron Robinson does something. I mean, maybe Trey Hawkins improves. I mean, there's just, I don't know. It's just not a position I'm too confident in. And speaking of signings, I forgot to react to the Allen Robinson signing. So I want to see how old he is. He's definitely not that old. He might be like 30, 31. He's only 30. Wow. I mean, he will be 31 by the time the year starts, but only 30 years old right now for Allen Robinson. He really has not been relevant since 2021, or 2020, I should say, where he did have 1,200 yards and 6 touchdowns and over 100 catches. But the past 3 seasons, he has not been that guy. There was a lot of hype about him with the Rams in 2022, like take some pressure off Cooper Kupp. You have Matthew Stafford, but even that season was not good from Robinson. He's a guy who's just can't separate anymore. Like, it is what it is. He's like a Kenny Golladay 2.0, who ironically, I remember that offseason, it was like between Golladay and Robinson. I think Robinson got franchise tagged, so it's funny how we got Golladay, and then a few years later, we get Allen Robinson too, so we got them both. My expectations for Robinson are not that great. I kind of put out a tweet as a joke talking about how I put like his 2015 highlights in there, and I'm like, oh my god, the Giants got a great player. Like I love tweets like that. It's funny to me. Like a team will sign a very old player and they put out their highlights from like 9-10 years ago, which is pretty much what I did with Allen Robinson, who, you know, in 2015 was an absolute dog, had like 1,400 yards, 14 touchdowns. Those days are long gone, sadly. Like him in his prime would have been a great fit for this team, but just not it right now. So anyway, yeah, definitely have concerns about the secondary, but we'll see how that goes, obviously. Next from Ben Lee 4573. I understand players, coaches play to win the game, but considering who we're facing next season, how would you feel if the Giants had a similar season like last season? Would you be okay with the Giants losing games considering we missed out on on talented quarterbacks this past draft and potentially land a franchise quarterback in the next draft? Do you think Shane and Dable get another chance for the 2025 season because they haven't gotten their own quarterback? So it's a good question. I mean, first and foremost, it'd be really sad if Brian Dable never got his own quarterback here. I mean, you could say Daniel Jones is his quarterback technically because he did, not he, but he's part of the regime that signed him and extended him. But it would be a shame if Brian Dable never got his own quarterback. I really hope that's not the case, but it kind of is what it is. Like they made their bed and now they have to lie in it. Like it's that kind of thing. They made this long-term commitment to Jones, and like going into year 3 in a regime with a 6.5 win total or over/under win total, it's not what you want. It's really not. I'm a person that I really do believe, and I've said this for years when I was battling with people and other fans about why Dave Gettleman sucks. I always said, like, you can really turn around the program in 3 years. You don't need 5, 6, 7 years to do a rebuild in the NFL. Like, we've seen countless examples of teams that can turn their team around sometimes in 2 years. So I'm giving them like an extra year. If you can't turn your team around by year 3, like 3 full off seasons, which Shane is in his 3rd off season, what's that say about you as a GM? Like, it's not good. So it's enough time, and to go into next year having really no excitement, because I think most of us know the Giants will not be that good next year. It says a lot about this regime. I'm not happy about it. But as I said, they passed on 3 quarterbacks in this draft. They whiffed on Russell Wilson, and here we are. So I'm hoping that Brian Dable gets another chance. I do ultimately think he will. Like, for Dable to get fired, it's going to take a bad season with some more drama and him yelling at people and having temper tantrums and all that type of stuff. But if the Giants, as long as they don't go, have a 1-win season or a 2-win season or a 3-win or 4-win, like if they just win like 5 games or more, I'm thinking that Dable will be safe and get to have his own quarterback. I do think Shane has a longer leash than Dable, because we know how this league works, and a lot of times the coach gets fired before the GM. You think back to Pat Shurmur and think back to the Dave Gettleman situation when both of them definitely should have went that offseason, or if not, kept them both. But of course they fired Shurmur and they kept Gettleman. So it's always that type of thing where the coach usually goes first. So I think Shane's pretty safe, assuming they win like more than 3 games next year. And even then, I'm not too confident he'd be fired. But for Dable, they have to win games for him. I'm not saying they have to win a lot once again, win a handful, and you'll probably be fine. But if it's a really, really bad season here next year, and it's a 2, 3, 4-win season, he may not get to have his own guy, which I'd feel really bad about. It would feel really stupid because the Giants brought in this coach who was most well known for helping develop Josh Allen. And this clown show organization would bring in that guy who helped mold Josh Allen to never give him a quarterback of his own. Like, that would just be the most Giants thing ever, which I really hope does not happen. But, it's a possibility. It's on the table. So, yeah, it's going to take a really bad season for that to happen. I hope it doesn't. Ultimately, look, I would sign up for a bad year right now if it told me that I got a franchise quarterback. That's why every single year when the Giants start out 1-5, 2-7, I root for them to lose. I do. Call me a bad fan, but I hate being in these situations like right now where we're like, shit, who's the quarterback going to be? And if we had just lost to the Patriots last year and lost like the Green Bay game as well, we could have had Drake May right now. We would not be having these conversations. That's why, to me, winning those games after your season's already over, it just does nothing but hurt you. Like, yeah, it helps the locker room for a couple weeks, yay, and it helps Brian Daboll keep his job. But it leads me to a question of, like, I've really thought about this before. Would you rather have Brian Daboll, or would you rather have Drake May and a different coach? Like, would you rather have Daboll and Locke/Jones, or have May and a new head coach? It's like a real question. Like, I might even choose the Drake May side. I really might. Like, I think a franchise quarterback is that important, where I do like Brian Daboll a lot, and he should be a good head coach for this team for a long time, hopefully. But you're offering me a young potential franchise quarterback who might be that guy for the next 10 to 15 years. It's tough to say no. Like, if the Patriots called you right now and said, hey, hey, Joe Shane, we'll give you Drake May, but you have to give us Brian Daboll and Daniel Jones. What do you say? I mean, I'm probably saying yes. So let's be honest here. So, anyway, yeah, that's why, the fake fan in me, as people say, I root for losses when it gets to a certain point, because I think it's more important to get yourself that franchise quarterback. Now, if we already had our franchise quarterback and we sucked, there's more reason to root for your team when you're 4-10 or 2-12. Like, there's more. If you already have your franchise quarterback in place, rooting for losses is definitely more frowned upon. But when you're in the Giants situation and you don't have a franchise quarterback anywhere in sight, once your season's lost, losing is probably the best thing for you. I hate to say it, but it's true. And don't be mad at me. Be mad at the Giants for putting you in this situation where you have to choose, the better of two evils. Like, it's their fault. Don't start out 1-4 every year, 2-6. Like, enough. All right, we got 2 more questions. It's gonna be a long video by the time this is done, but hey, hope you guys enjoy. From Hank Scorpio 13, if you had to guess, what would you say Shane's vision for this team's identity is? I see a lot of people that were frustrated after the draft saying this team has no identity or vision for the future. What do you think of Joe? What do you think Joe's long-term plan is? Love the videos as always, so thank you for that. That really is the main issue. Like, it's hard to know what exactly the vision is for this team, because I definitely know, well, I can't say I definitely know, but it seems like Joe Shane, when he first got hired here, had a plan of how to do this, but they just unexpectedly won 9 games in the first year, which kind of threw off everything. So ultimately, if you go back in time, maybe that 2022 season was the worst thing for this franchise, and maybe right now, let's say in 2022 they struggled, we could have had one of those top quarterbacks, like maybe my guy Anthony Richardson would be a Giants quarterback right now. So that season kind of threw off their plans, and I feel like ever since then they've just been trying to regroup, because last year, in their eyes, they were expecting to at least compete for the playoff. They did not expect to be a horrible team picking 6th overall. So it was a bit of a slap in the face, or not even a bit. It was definitely a slap in the face for them. So now they kind of have to collect the pieces and go from there. And it's annoying because, as I said earlier, going into year 3 of a new regime, this is the 3rd offseason once again, you would hope that your team's in a spot to compete. But as I just said before, I think the Giants are a 6 or 7 win team right now. Could be more, could be less by a little bit, but ultimately I would expect better. Because if you asked me in 2022 when Joe Shane was hired, hey Mike, what do you think the Giants will be doing in the 2024 season? I would be expecting, hopefully a 10-win season and competing for a deep playoff run. And as we sit here today, that's not the case. So, I know winning those games in 2022, it was nice, but it definitely hurt the long-term vision of Joe Shane. It does feel like they're putting off the quarterback position until they find the perfect prospect, which may not exist, which is kind of my frustration with this team. Yeah, maybe McCarthy wasn't perfect. Yeah, Penix definitely wasn't perfect. Yeah, Bo Nix, same thing. But you have to eventually take a swing. There's only so many quarterback prospects that are viewed as this flawless and perfect guy. And even in some cases, it doesn't work out. Like Trevor Lawrence, I do like him, but he's been a bit underwhelming so far. Did win a playoff game, had that massive comeback versus the Chargers. That was great, but still a bit underwhelming. So nobody's a sure thing. So at some point, the Giants have to take their shot at the quarterback position. That's why they kind of feel a bit directionless right now. It seems like right now their plan is to load up on talent. They have guys, they have good, not super young, but like good core pieces in their prime. Talking about Andrew Thomas and Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns. Kayvon's still young. Neighbors is still young. Hopefully a guy like Newbin in the secondary can be a long-term answer. Deonte Banks is young. So they have their guys that are in the middle of their prime right now, and some guys that are a bit younger that they're hoping are a part of this core, and hopefully by the 2025 season, which would be next year, 2 years from now, I guess, whatever you want to call it, the Giants will hopefully be competing. And I guess it depends, because if they go the veteran quarterback route next offseason, which has been talked about, so let's say in the 2025 offseason, the Giants sign Dak Prescott. I'm not saying I want this, but let's say it happens. That means in the 2025 season, you're ready to compete right now. It's Dak Prescott's been in the NFL for a long time. There's no transition period. But if the Giants draft a quarterback in the first round in 2025, that's going to be a rookie quarterback who has to get acclimated. Sometimes rookie quarterbacks hit the ground running like a Robert Griffin III or a CJ Stroud last year. There are times it happens. Even Lamar Jackson, I know he played half a year, but he was still effective and won some games for them. So the point is, though, if you draft a rookie in the next year's draft, you may have to wait until 2026 to really start competing, because I think it's fair to give a rookie quarterback a full year to once again acclimate himself to the NFL. But if they go out and get a veteran quarterback like a Dak or a Tua or someone like that, they can look at next season in 2025 as like, all right, we're all in. We have our guys, we have Neighbors, we have Dex, we have Thomas, we have Newbin, Neighbors, all these guys. Kayvon, like, let's go. We're ready to win. So it depends what they do. And it's been 3.5 years of Joe Schoen so far. And while the guy, for the most part, has a pretty good process and makes responsible adult decisions, some things that Dave Gettleman could not do, it's still been a bit underwhelming so far. I was hoping for a bit more. I think the Daniel Jones extension really turned me off to Joe Schoen. I was hoping for a franchise tag or just let the guy walk. I know that was not like the most feasible option, but it was possible to let the guy walk once again. So, they have to bounce back from that. I don't think the one Jones mistake should be the end of Joe Schoen. Like, he should get a second chance here, but ultimately it's taking a bit longer than I would have liked. If Schoen came in here and knocked it out the park and was great, the Giants would be competing right now for hopefully a Super Bowl. But we may have to wait another year or two for that. And, good things do come with patience if Joe Schoen is the right guy. But if he's not, then it's going to be a waste of time, and we'll be looking for another GM by 2026. So we'll see how it goes. He's definitely better than Gettleman. I will give Joe Schoen that any day of the week. But so far, I've been a bit underwhelmed. I think right now the identity is just, play for next year. Get a good draft pick. Could that be the identity? I don't know. Because, offensively, there is no identity. Like, Saquon's gone, so you're not going to be, like, a ground-and-pound type of team. It's not going to be the case. Maybe if Drew Lock comes in there, they'll be, like, this aired-out team, throw it deep to Hyatt, throw it deep to Neighbors, Wandale. Like, they have the vertical threats, even Darius Slayton if he stays on this team. So they'll have that identity with Drew Lock, who definitely takes his deep chances. But even defensively, maybe I could see a scenario where by the end of the season, the Giants' identity could be like a team that gets to the quarterback with Kayvon and with Dex and with Brian Burns and like that big three of a pass rush. And then offensively, their identity could be like Drew Lock airs it out to Slayton, to Neighbors, and Jalen Hyatt. And maybe that's sort of their identity, like this air it out type of offense that has a very good pass rush, and maybe that's what they go off of. I have no idea. So that's my guess, but right now it's been a bit disappointing as I said, 3.5 years in. Last but not least, Elena Buccino. Hi, Mikey TN. Just here to tell you, the Giants stink. Tell us something we don't know here. Love you, go Jets. Well, I love you too. And go Jets, I guess. I don't know. The Jets, I'm hoping the Jets do well. I do like Aaron Rodgers, so I hope they do well. We don't play them this year, so I can root for the Jets this year, not feel too bad about it. Hopefully your season lasts more than 4 plays this time. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got. So once again, I don't know how long this video will be by the time I edit it, but it should be a long video. It might be the longest podcast ever. So I hope you guys enjoy. Not sure when the next podcast will be and what type of news we'll be dropping, but maybe we'll do like another questions video in like a month or so. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys next time.